All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this formative webinar on how to level up with Formative, an advanced webinar where we are going to talk about some ways you can use Formative in your classroom with your students and hopefully get started right away. So I will begin a little bit about myself. My name is Aaron Tarbell. I'm a client success manager here at Formative, and I have been working at Formative for about 2 years now. I'm a former teacher. I used to teach middle school humanities. I taught for 8 years in middle school, 7th grade and 8th grade. And I actually used Formative in my classroom with my students. So I love getting an opportunity to share with teachers all the different ways that they can use Formative in their classroom. And it's really exciting because all of the features that we're talking about today weren't even in existence on Formative when I was a teacher. So it's going to be great to share some ideas for you all on how you can get the most out of Formative. Some things to know. This session is being recorded. I'm actually going to set that recording right now. All right, and it is scheduled for 30 minutes. So we have 30 minutes together. And if you have any questions along the way, please type them into the chat. I'll try to address them as quickly as I can. I'll also be pausing at different points throughout the webinar to address any of those questions. So what we have on our agenda today is how you can create a formative using sections, which is one of our newest features, and kind of what the difference is between sections and content blocks, which is also a newer feature, but something we kind of started introducing in the last year. And so we'll go over some of the differences between those and the use cases for each of them. By the end of this, you'll also understand the difference between teacher paced mode and single question view, or student paced mode, sometimes we call it. And then finally, toward the end, we will talk about how you can grade student work or responses and send feedback to them quickly and efficiently. So if you are not signed into your Formative account, it may be easiest for you to be able to follow along if you are. So you can go ahead and head over to www.formative.com. And in the upper right-hand corner there, you'll see the login button, and you can choose whatever login method you use. If you're already signed in, you'll see the My Dashboard button in that same place. And so you can just hit that to be taken to your Formative dashboard. And I'm hoping we'll have a little bit of time at the end where you'll get to experience Formative kind of from the student side. So if you're signed in, that process will just be a lot quicker and easier. So while people are getting signed in, let's see here, sorry. All right. So while people are getting signed in, I'm going to dive right into my Formative account. And so I'll actually kind of demo what that dashboard page looks like. So you'll see here, if you're already signed in, there's a My Dashboard button in the upper right. You can click on to be taken to your Formative dashboard. And I am going to be kind of looking at you, looking at my screen. I have multiple screens in front of me, but I'll be doing my best to let you kind of know where you should be looking if you're following along with your own personal account, kind of when to take a look at my Zoom screen and whatnot. So I'm on my screen right now, and on my Formatives dashboard, you may have noticed our dashboard's gotten a bit of a makeover over the last week or so. We've made a few adjustments for accessibility purposes to make buttons kind of easier to see, navigation a little bit more clear. And so we do have that new Formative button here in the same place it's always been. I'm going to click that new Formative button. First thing I always want to do is make a title. So I'll title this Adding Content and Sections, since that's what we're talking about right now. So I have my title there. And when I click on the bouncing plus sign, I am given all of the options I have to build out a Formative. Now, depending on if you're already a partner or premium teacher with us, or even if you have a free account, This might look a little bit different, but for the most part, we'll all be looking at similar things. And what we're going to be focusing on here is this left-hand column. Some of you may see the yellow button down here. Some of you may have a red button called Documents. But overall, we're looking at the content options. Now, one of the kind of oldest features of Formative is the ability to upload a PDF and attach questions to it. That's kind of been one of our features the whole run. We've expanded that ability to any of our red content options. So if you record an audio sample of yourself reading a passage, you can attach questions that are linked to that content for students. The same goes for if you embed another website. Let's say you're using a simulation website like GeoGebra or PhET. You can embed that content into Formative and attach questions to it. For simplicity's sake and kind of content sake, I'm going to choose an image here to show you what it looks like when you attach questions to content. So I'm going to click on image, and I'm just going to upload an image from my computer. So give me just a moment here. Let's go with, sorry, I lost my image. Here we go. Got this image. I was a social studies teacher, so I've got my image of Cortez meeting Montezuma, and I'm going to add that image in. And what I will see here on the right-hand side is this blue plus sign again. And so now I have the option, if I want, to attach questions. If I don't, that's totally fine. I can just have the image there, or really any content I upload will be there for my students to see. But if I want to add questions to it, I can add a few short answers here. Let's say, what do you notice? And I'll add another short answer. And we'll write, we'll do a little notice and wonder protocol here. So I've got my two questions. You can see the students can scroll down. The image is right here to the left. And if I click on the preview button up here at the top, I can see what this is going to look like for my students. This is another change. You may be used to the eyeball icon if you've used the preview in the past. Try to make it a little clearer that this is where you can preview what students will see. So you can see here, my students see the image. They can zoom in on it if they want, and they can answer their questions right next to the image. So there's no guesswork in terms of what the questions are tied to. So this is a kind of a newer feature we have. We launched probably toward the beginning of this school year for students to be able to see content and questions together. Now, what I want to talk about a little bit next is our newer feature, which is sections. Sections has been one of the most requested features we've had by teachers, because teachers wanted to be able to group questions together, be able to randomize questions within that group, and also just be able to structure their lessons more easily. So with sections, premium teachers are able to organize their formatives, grouping several questions together, and it allows them to maintain, the sections together. So what you can do to add a section, I'm actually going to add one ahead of this. I click the plus sign, I'm faced with my content or question type option, and in the bottom right here, it says add a section. So I'm going to click on that. And before I get into my lesson here, I'm going to use this opportunity to add a check-in with my students. So I do that, you can see the section here. I'm going to click on the plus sign again. I'm going to add a multiple choice question. And I'm going to say, how are you feeling today? Let's say this is what I want students to do first thing when they walk in. And I can add some options. We'll just do some emojis. I just want to know how my students are feeling, do a quick little wellness check. We'll do a sad emoji. Let's see, here we go. And maybe an upset emoji. So here we go. We've got some emojis there. My students, they walk in. Here's the check-in. This is how they're feeling today, just to get a quick sense of how my students are doing, so I kind of know what the temperature of the room is. And I'm going to add a new section next above my content. And we'll call this the lesson intro. All right. And then let's say after this content, I'm going to add another section. And we'll call this checks for understanding. Let's say I could really title this whatever I want, whatever the structure of the lesson is that I'm working with. And I can add more questions in here. I'm just going to do some blank ABC questions. We'll duplicate this. Just a couple blank questions to demonstrate here. So I have right here my formative made out, and I can see these sections. And you may be wondering, all right, so there's a line. What difference does that make? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my student preview by clicking on that preview button. And once this loads, what I'm going to see is kind of how this looks for students. So the first thing you'll notice is the progress bar at the top. There's a line separating each section, and students can see if there's content and questions attached. And students also see a previous and a next button. So they can control what section they're going to and when. So when they enter the classroom, they sign into my formative. First thing, they've got their check-in, just how they're feeling. And they can click next, and that's going to take them to the next section. They can see all of the content that I've loaded, any questions attached to the content. They can respond to those questions. And if they click next again, they're going to see that third section, the check for understanding with the questions attached there. So it's not quite one question at a time, but it does go section by section for the students. So it's a way for you to be able to keep your students organized, keep all the clutter out of there so that they're not distracted by things that maybe you don't want them getting to yet. You want them to stay focused on one part of the lesson. You can do that with sections. And one thing to note, if I decided to randomize my questions on my formative when I'm assigning it, formative is going to randomize questions within each section, but the section order is going to remain the same. So that's just a brief demo of kind of how sections work and how content items work. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to see if they're following along, if that's kind of making sense, or if you have any questions. All right. And one thing I want to talk about is if I'm just assigning standard mode and I have sections, my students are going to see that section by section toolbar. If I, under my assign settings, let's say I'm assigning to students, and I choose this top item to display each item as a separate page, if I select that and click assign, what this is going to do for my students, I'm going to go to the preview. I want to talk a little bit about deciding to go question by question. When I click next, the content is still going to stay grouped together. Any questions grouped with content will always appear together when you assign, regardless of how you're assigning. The content questions are always grouped together. And then if I click next again, you'll see I can tell as a student I'm in the next section, but it's still showing me only one question at a time. So that's just the difference. If you assign regularly with sections, students will see an entire section at once. If you choose to display one question at a time or each item as a separate page, students will only see each question or content block at a time. And I have a question here. If you can save a section and duplicate it. So on our edit screen, you'll see a triple dot question next to a section. You have the option to duplicate or move that section. So if I duplicate it, it is going to create a new exact section with all the questions in it, and it'll have a little copy next to me. So I'll know that that's the copy and I can rename it if I want. Or I can move the section kind of up and down, move the section here. I can move it to wherever I want within the lesson. Excellent question. All right. So I just talked a little bit about student paced mode, the one question at a time. And if you have used teacher paced mode at all, you'll notice that that is very similar. So with the single question view, students have the ability to go one question at a time, guiding themselves through the lesson. It displays each item or group of items, content items, as a separate page. Students can move back and forth at their own pace. It's great for self-paced learning and blended learning opportunities. It's also great for students with accommodations. Maybe seeing the whole lesson at once can be overwhelming. This is a great way to kind of focus students. But this also puts students in complete control. So they move through the formative on their own using the previous and next buttons. Teacher-paced mode is slightly different, and we're going to get an experience right now where I want to show you how you can begin a formative in teacher-paced mode and release it to your students. So this is where I would love some participation on your part. If you could follow me to the Formatives dashboard, where you see all of your list of formatives and classes. And in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a box that says enter code with a little grayed out go button next to it. And I'm going to give you a code right now. Let me go here. So the code to enter there is BW9M9C. I'm going to put that in the chat. BW9M9C in the chat. And you can also go to app.formative.com/join and enter the code there as well if you're not on your dashboard to enter the quick code. But I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to go there. And while you're joining, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can set up a teacher-paced mode lesson. So I have here an example formative. Oops, let's go to this. This is an example to show you how you could deliver a lesson to your students using teacher-paced mode and releasing it to student-paced. So if you go to the assign toggle at the top and select a class, I'm selecting guest students right now because you all have accounts, you're teachers, you're not in my classes. So I'm assigning to guest students. I do not recommend, if you're dealing with your own students, if you've created classes, always assign to your classes. Guest mode, assigning to guest students is going to create temporary logins and temporary accounts for your students, so it will not be tied to their student accounts. So make sure if you're assigning to students that you're selecting one of your actual rostered classes. For our purposes, I'm assigning to guest students. If you're ever running a PD with other teachers, guest students is a great opportunity. So I'm over here, I selected a class and I've toggled on teacher-paced mode. You'll notice when I do toggle on teacher-paced mode, if you see my screen, it does remove some of the assigned settings for me, and that is by design. If you are controlling the pace, it doesn't make a lot of sense for students to be timed on their work. So we want to be fair to the students. We've taken out some of those settings. So if you toggle it on and you notice those assigned settings disappear, it's all good. That's by design. And I'm going to click update. And that's going to automatically open up a new tab for me, which is my teacher-paced mode tab. So whenever you're delivering a lesson in teacher-paced mode, you're going to have two tabs that you can work with. One is the tab that I'm showing you on my screen right now. It has a big start button on it. I can see the lesson at the top left, the guest code, or if you've assigned it to a class, which class you're working with. And there's a share button if I need to get that join information to my students. So if you're logged in, you're probably seeing a wait button waiting for the teacher to start. As a teacher, I also have, I see a few people have logged in. I have some people who already took this formative before. If you're logged in as a teacher, you also have that view responses page where you can see the student responses coming in real time. I love displaying the view responses page for students while they're working. The reason being, I can hide names. So in the upper right-hand corner here, there's a little face icon. And if I click on it, I can show or hide student names. Having students work up here, but having it anonymous is a really great way for students to see the progress, but also we'll be able to dive into a single question and look at the answers that are coming in. So I always love recommending to teachers that they display the responses and hide student names. But so whichever screen you choose to display, this one is the one that's going to help you control the pace of the lesson. So I'm going to click Start. And you should see on your screen right now an instructions block letting you know what the purpose of this lesson is. I've already talked about that, so I'm going to hit Next. This is a mini lesson on the Pythagorean theorem. Disclaimer here, humanities teacher, not a former math teacher, so forgive me if I get things wrong, but I think I've got this one fairly down. I've got our objective here. I'm going to hit Next. And first thing, again, a notice and wonder protocol. Go ahead, let me know, look at this image, tell me what you notice, tell me what you wonder, take some time. You should see this question on your screen. This is a content image that I attached a question to, a free response question. And you will also notice there's no submit button on your screen. Your answers are coming in real time. Did I not update the teacher facing mode? I did. Okay. Your answers are coming in real time for me to see. If I click on number 1 here, I can see responses coming in. And if I wanted to display these for my students, I would be able to go over those as a class. So I'm going to move us on to the next question. And you'll see here, this is just a content item. I chose to add a text block here, but I don't have any questions attached to it. I'm just delivering content for my students. Get some definitions in there for us of what a right triangle is and what a hypotenuse is. It's the longest length of the triangle. And I'm going to go next again so that we can see the next content item. This is an embedded website with a simulation. And what you can do is you can actually interact with the simulation here, moving it around. And what we're going to be doing is dragging the blue circles, the blue dots, to the vertices that are labeled in each question and fill in what C is. So I'm going to drag A down to 3, and I'm going to make B 4. Here we go. And my answer for C should be 5. So everyone can go ahead and enter 5 for number 2. And I want you to try out numbers 3 and 4 on your own. So I'm going to give everyone some time there. People are entering number 2. I'm going to order this. And I've got some people entering into number 3. And I'm going to move us on. Even if you're not done, it's okay. We're going to go on to this next one where we're going to talk about how you find the length of the hypotenuse. This is the Pythagorean theorem, right? The a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I've got an image here kind of describing what that should look like in your work, kind of adding a model for you. And I want you to find the length of the hypotenuse on number 5. I want you to show your work. And I also want you to enter your response in the answer space. This is a great example of combining a non-auto-graded tool, which is show your work, with an auto-graded question type. So I've added show your work to a short response question, and I'm able to set an answer key while also seeing student work. So go ahead, start working on number 5. I can see some responses coming in here. I can see the auto grade taking over. I can see answers entered in. And let's take a look at this answer in particular. This student got the answer correct. If you're looking at my screen, I'm looking at number 5. the student got the answer correct, but they didn't quite show their work. So for me as a teacher, I can always adjust their score if I wanted to, in order to make sure that they're showing their work for me. And I'm going to go back to teacher paced mode. I'm going to move us on, even if you're not done with number 6 yet, because what I'm going to do now is show you how you can go from teacher paced mode, where you're controlling the pace, to releasing your students to work on their own. So now this is a great example of using formative for kind of that gradual release of responsibility and independent student practice. If I click on this end session button here in the upper right, I have a few options. I can force submission or close the assignment, both of which would end the lesson for my students, right? Their work is submitted. Depending on my settings, they can't go back in and edit their responses. Or I can switch to student paced, which I'm going to do now. And that's going to release the entire formative to the students, so they can see and they can go back to any questions or content that they missed before, they want to redo, they want to revisit. They have the full control, and they can move ahead as well to finish the formative at their own pace. The great thing about this is, in releasing that responsibility to students, it allows students to go at their own pace, but I also have this formative data from the first few questions to see, hey, some of my students weren't able to keep up with the teacher pace. They were struggling, they were getting answers wrong, they weren't showing their work. This is where I can easily go in, look at my results, and grab students to pull for a small group, or group with students in different ways in order to make sure that they're understanding the content. And so that right there is kind of the difference between teacher paced mode and student paced mode. Single question view for students, you can still adjust that in your assigned settings. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to change it to display as each item as a separate page and update that. And so now my students can still go through one question at a time, but they are working at their own pace. So it kind of keeps that same view of the teacher pace, the focused view, but they can still work at their own pace. And so there's no pressure to go through and finish the whole formative. I won't mark you down for it. But that is the difference between teacher paced mode and student paced mode. Now, finally, when I'm looking at my results here, I can view question by question. And I want to go back to that question number 5, because this is what I was talking about, where if they didn't show their work, but they got the answer correct, I can adjust the grade manually. Maybe I want to take off a certain number of points for not showing their work, or I can also draw feedback for my students, right? I can, and that will send an image of their work to them in our chat so that they can see what I want them to look at. Or I can, don't forget to show your work. I can start a chat with them, send them resources, send them feedback. And I can also, let's take a look at number 2. If I wanted, when I select one student, I can continue to select other student bubbles, or there's an all button down here. And I can select all my students, adjust the score for everyone at once, or any students I have selected, and send a feedback message to every student in the class at once. Maybe I want to send feedback to just the students who didn't get it. If I can control command to select multiple students. And I can send feedback to multiple students at one time. They won't know that they got feedback from me from multiple, they won't know I sent feedback to multiple people, they'll just know they got feedback from me. So that's a quick way to send feedback to your students and grade student work by seeing it all side by side on one screen. And that is what I have for you. Sorry about my dog barking in the background. That is what I have for you today. I do want to point out, if there's anything we talked about today that you have questions about, you're wondering how you can get more information on it. If you go to the question mark icon in the upper right-hand corner of your account, You can search through our Help Center articles, search keywords. You also have access to our training center from there. So I'm going to go, you probably are familiar with the training center because I bet that's how you signed up for this webinar. But if you go to our training center, we have self-paced courses, webinars coming up, and recordings of our previous webinars as well. And you can also contact support with any troubleshooting needs that you may have. And so thank you so much for joining us. The last thing I want to show you is if you would like to receive a certificate of attendance to this webinar, you are welcome to scan this QR code with your phone and take the short survey so that we can send that to you. Or you can head to tinyurl.com/formative-webinars. I'm putting that in the chat as well. And I have a question here real quick. If I made a lesson with 5 sections, is it possible to duplicate this and then in the new one, take out the sections? So if you duplicate the lesson, let's see here. I believe you should be able to do that. Let me just test real quick. So if we copy the lesson, and then if I delete the section, it will also remove all questions. So what I would recommend doing is I would recommend moving this question maybe to the end. Move your questions to the end and delete the section then so that you don't delete the questions within the section. What you can also do is if you want to build a new formative, you can go through and when you're adding an option, search from existing questions. And then you can just add in the questions and not the sections. So you can kind of rebuild it from there. That would be an option. All right, but I'm going to keep that QR code up for a minute and let everyone who needs it grab that certificate of completion. Thank you all so much for attending, and I hope you all have a great day.